This is a 51 Vets case study with Ben Brettmann, who spent 12 years active duty, 10 years SF. And I think we've known each other since 2021 or so when he got involved with 51 Vets. And I think this can be interesting to really hear about his journey, not just out of his first transition getting out, but also the latest transition to investment banking where you've been at for the past year. And this can be good, open, honest conversation about the pros, cons about investment banking. So I'll kind of leave it there and turn it over to you, Ben. But let's just kind of first start off with, what do you actually do today? Where are you at? How long have you been there? What do you do day to day? And then we can kind of dive into some of the kind of key lessons and thoughts for the transition.
Yeah, sure thing. Appreciate the time, and always happy to help with folks that are kind of in that same boat and working on that pathway to, go to the next, step in their life and whatever that may bring. Obviously, it's a tumultuous time, emotional time for a lot of folks, but rest assured that other people have done it before you. And be sure to lean in on folks that have actually been through that, even if it's just to rant or like understand like the situation that you're in and how to best help you. Like the network effect is real. So be sure to lean into that as we've grown as a organization. As far as my day to day, I currently reside in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm at Triple Tree Investment Bank. It's an all healthcare bank. We do mostly sell side M&As, but we've also done buy side stuff as well. Last year we were busy. We, in a kind of, so to speak, we closed 26 deals. So it's pretty big for a firm of like 100 people, basically, give or take. With that, the day-to-day grind is honestly, we're just kind of in a flux where it was this startup kind of investment bank that has slowly morphed into like a more corporate structure based on being acquired by Capital One. So with that, growing
When was
pains
that
in
acquisition?
2021.
Okay.
So been a while, but we have an office in New York, we have an office in Minnesota where it was originated, and they also had a capital markets side as well. And so Triple Tree Capital Markets or Capital Partners is their own entity now. They split off from us in that sense. With that, the basics for our firm, we basically deal in I would say three verticals: services. You think about healthcare services from dental clinics, dermatology, infusion, just examples like that, all the way to healthcare IT, and then also cost and containment. So if you think about pharmacy benefit managers to third-party administrators, and those guys basically manage your, healthcare plans for companies and things like that. So we work with folks that basically help get you, your service and deal with the backside stuff, whether it's like revenue cycle management or what have you. And a lot of synergy going on in that space right now. So always something
How many
interesting.
how many
Healthcare.
deals have you worked on that have been live?
Uh, this will be it'll be four. So two close. I'm 2 for 2, which is pretty nice. uh, and then I deal with a buy side, and then we're just about to kick off another one here shortly.
Yeah.
So
Well, the two that you closed, what space were they in, and kind of what were you doing throughout the process?
yeah, so the first one was a healthcare IT, human resource management platform. And it was basically just getting in the weeds on scheduling meetings, getting, running the racetrack, getting all the buyers, NDAs, up to speed and everything else, managing the data room, just making sure like all the little nitnoid stuff on a deal doesn't fall through the cracks. And then from that point, then you slowly like get into the next level of stuff, whether it's in the modeling aspect, and obviously you're building marketing materials like your teasers, your SIPs and stuff like that, and building out support for all the information that's in there based on what you have in the model or out in the open market stuff. So
Let's do banking analyst banking 101, like the breakdown of the process. So like during the pitch phase, when the triple team was going to the client, like what were you doing on that? How long was the pitch? How do you break down? What are the different sections of a pitch? Because I think it's helpful to kind of talk about, what happens before you actually get hired.
yeah, for sure. So I mean, this stuff let me just take you to something that recently happened. So there's the JP Morgan conference every year for the health conference that's out in San Francisco. That's kind of where we make our bread and butter, like in a sense of getting out into the market the first thing of the year. You get to go and not only chat with buyers, but some of the clients that you already have, you get to kind of showcase them in certain respects and do one-on-one like management meetings with potential suitors, that might be interested in that particular business. With that, there's a lot of legwork that goes involved to be prepping for that. So for example, for that conference alone that lasts like 3-4 days, we planned 6 months in advance. And so that is consistent of going out there, making sure that like everything is ducks in a row as far as like getting the right people, meeting with the right clients per se, but then also for new business development opportunities to be able to go out there, have kind of a target list of folks that we know we have to talk to while we're there, and getting our directors and folks out there to go and make sure that they have those touch points with
Yeah.
those particular people, just to get the conversation going on like what we have, what they're looking for, getting all those basics as far as like every fund has a certain threshold for check size and like what they're looking for, if these are tuck-in opportunities or straight de novo opportunities, so generally where people play, but that stuff is always subject to change. So it's always good to just have a beer with somebody and get the reading on that and like what they're looking for that year, because it's imperative for you and it's imperative for them to kind of know what's out there. And luckily I just been fortunate enough to be at a bank that has such a reputation out there, and they people actually come to us quite a bit to see what we have,
Yeah.
so it's kind of a
What's
nice.
the what's the approximate breakdown between the companies that you're hired by that are private equity owned and you're selling the company, 5 to 7 years later versus, founders, entrepreneur owned? What's the general breakdown?
I would say like 50-50, to be
Okay.
honest. So normally like for example, we did a reverse pharmacy distribution services company. They take, drugs from pharmacies and give them back to the manufacturer. So they get
Yeah.
new drugs back down to the pharmacy. That was a founder led business, and, really, really happy with the results. It took a while from the go time, launch time from April until this year to
Yeah.
close it out. But those are the circumstances have changed, obviously, with more diligence, everything else that's happening right now. And so with that, like I said, it's like 50-50, give or take. But when you've already had those working relationships, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. And I think the important part here for people who are less familiar with the investment banking process, when you're trying to get hired during like, I mean, the marketing phase, the way that you are sourcing these deals is through your relationships with private equity firms that the managing directors and directors cover. And they know out of these 10 companies in the portfolio, these two businesses are going to come up for sale in the next year or two. So they want to get ahead of that, and they want to be able to position themselves as, here is why you hire us as a firm. We have sold 10 other businesses in this particular space. Here's your valuation that we think it's going to be at. Here are the buyers for it. Here's the state of the market. Here's how we're going to position the business. Here are the investment highlights. This is all the work that goes into the business, you know, before you get hired by that client. And then you're doing the pitch book. So you got to put together the deck, do the valuations, the comps, et cetera.
Yep, exactly. So, I mean, just for folks just to be on the level playing field. So, like a pitch deck is obviously what you use to market yourself to hopefully garner business and get clients. And so, what that entails is sometimes you have a bake off, sometimes it's just you by yourself, but essentially you're competing with other folks. And in this stage, we deal in middle market companies for the most part. So it's very much predicated on like, have you got things done at this price line? So like when you look at, for example, in tech and SaaS, for instance, where the multiples are pretty high and you see a little bit of traction as far as revenue growth, maybe even profitable on an EBITDA level. What that means to other folks is that they can get in and swoop in and buy a company outright. Where like what we do generally, you could get a company that gets bought out completely, but a lot of times the deals are structured where there's carryover and rollover for a lot of the folks that are part of the business, and most likely they're just taking chips off the table to be able to get compensated for running a business successfully for
Yeah.
10 years, right? So those are kind of the myriad of differences in a sense of like the lower market where stuff gets gobbled up by big tech firms. Maybe they use it, maybe they don't, where this stuff is already integrated into the healthcare system. They already have their accreditations, whether it be from a security standpoint online or name it, like being accredited within the myriad of accreditations that you can get through healthcare.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can actually wind a lot. How'd you get the job?
So that's an interesting conversation for me, just because it was having to run through several networks simultaneously. So one of the main things is as you're starting this and you're doing what I would call your kind of research pre-journey slash expose on what this is and like what kind of life you're getting into. And then comes the hard part of like getting a warm intro to places. And so with that, you can utilize what I would consider as like your veteran community, your if you went to school somewhere, like using your alumni, and then obviously just sometimes cold calling people on LinkedIn and just to do coffee chats and things like that. So a perfect example is like once I really figured out like, yeah, I want to do this, I'm pushing forward, uh, definitely lean into folks on the 51 Vets board, like Jeremy Holland, who's instrumental in doing warm intros for everybody in the group. He definitely helped. I'm from Denver, basically. So he helped map out Denver for me. Like every person that, Riverside has ever done business with, he knows. So with that, why would you let that slip away as far as that asset is concerned? And Jeremy will help create the conversation, do the warm intro, and give you kind of any background that he might know on that particular individual to help you succeed in getting the second meeting.
Yep.
So that when it all said and done, I actually counted it out. It was about 80 coffee chats, give or take, in I would say a span of 8 months. So between that and then finally getting it down to the market and the timing and everything, this is 2022. This is after the gangbusters of 21, and everybody was laying people off. So unfortunately, I couldn't stay in Denver. I had to widen my radius search on like where to live and what, how to get into banking. And fortunately enough, I was able to get in with Triple Tree just through networking.
Did you originally restrict yourself to Denver, or were there other geographies that you were considering? And then I think it kind of hit that point where like, all right, these geographies aren't going to work. I have to broaden the aperture or widen the aperture.
Yeah, so I wanted New York, I wanted Denver, and maybe the West Coast in some capacity. And I lived in Texas before in the military, so it wasn't like going to be too crazy of a lift to get me to Texas again. But with that, like it just the timing of everything, and people were just they could understand I was trying and they were trying to help out best that they could, but you never know where you're going to get your yes from. So just keep pounding the pavement, keep understanding that it's a no right now, but it could be a yes down the road as long as you've painted a good picture of yourself and repped yourself good enough to like get another phone call. You should be able to like give folks like I would say like an update on like where your journey has taken you so far and everything else. And so for example, been looking around, just seeing what's available because Minnesota is not my place I want to call home forever. And so looking at that, there's still a little bit more versatility on the bottom rungs of investment banking. And so getting to a bigger market where there are more opportunities, more synergy effects with veterans, with other bankers, et cetera. That's been kind of the stress test for me right now, and just seeing where things are. And just to note that everything in banking is cyclical. Like I was fortunate enough to get hired as an off-cycle hire, but most of the time that's few and far between. It's definitely a tougher route to go, just based on your experience level, a lot of other factors, and like what the need of that bank is at that time.
Yeah.
So think
Did
about that.
Jeremy connect you with Triple Tree?
No, this was a connection I had on my own, but I mean, Jeremy gave me probably about out of those 80 plus, probably I'd say 60,
Yeah.
65.
And I think that's a key transition tip is to find an advisor who will help you map out an industry in your target cities.
Yep.
Who are the investment banks? Who are the private equity firms? Who are the big corporates? Who are the accounting firms? Who are the law firms? And just get a lot of density of network in your target cities. And maybe you don't stay in that city, but at least you learn how to map out a city and an industry, and you can just copy and paste that to other geographies.
Yeah, and it's super important because like a lot of folks at the top don't really change, especially at like more family office style places. So like in Denver, for example, people from my university, University of Denver, actually hit me up because I know I've mapped this out. And so like people that are a part of the finance school, they actually recommend folks to me to like make intros to folks I've already met.
Yeah. So
Things like
when
that.
did when did you start when did you start at Triple Tree, and what were the first few months like, and just kind of walk us through the journey so far?
Yeah, so started literally a year ago. I knew I was coming here um, probably in November. So that's when right after Thanksgiving of 22 is when I interviewed and had a couple of, technical interviews, but mostly like culture fit and stuff like that. Was able to get here in February of 23. Normally you get a little bit more free time as far as the beginning goes to kind of get your FINRA exams and things like that going. But uh, most of the time firms are kind of guesstimating what the turnover is going to be after bonus season. And so with that, for folks that don't know, it's like usually around January, February timeframe, you're going to know where you sit with the firm, who's getting promoted, all that good stuff. And people are kind of estimating what their life cycle within the firms usually are. And so like during this time, it's kind of nerve wracking for a lot of folks, especially that are like on the bubble per se of like moving to the next level or not. With that, they estimate how many people are going to stay based on the promotions and what have you. And so with that, a lot of folks just left, in that sense. And we were pretty short. And they basically told me within 2 weeks of getting here, it's like, hey, you're on deals because we need you. So, um, at,
And I think that's actually a good observation that the smaller the firm, the more boutique it is, the less structured it can be, and it's good and bad. I had a similar experience at BDA Partners where I was at for over 6 years. And that's just like, you're going to be on a deal. And when I was at analyst and associate training in the modeling courses, I'm literally doing two deals on the side. Like I had my laptop to the side of the computer doing diligence questions, putting together pitch decks as I'm in analyst training. I'm like, this is this supposed to work this way?
yeah.
um, but I think that's one of the interesting things about boutiques is that you also have more flexibility to get onto the projects you want, to get more exposure to MDs than might be common at just a larger bulge bracket where you have a rigid structure. I think it's one of the upsides of a boutique, but there's also the downside of, wait, I'm starting tomorrow on this pitch. I'm on the deal today. What? Where do I start?
Yeah, definitely.
Put me in, coach, but where do I shoot?
Yeah, we're established enough, like where it's not that crazy of a turnaround per se, but in a sense of, like I talk with the operations person like once a month. And so with that, you kind of have an understanding of you type in your hours per week and like what you're doing and what deals so they can see, sensitivity wise, like where are we stretched? How can we maneuver manpower accordingly? And so my firm's really good about that. And just knowing like where everybody's at. I think that comes from being a smaller bank at first and like actually coming into their own on like what they're doing now. And so it's very, very methodical in that sense, and it's appreciative. And like you said, at the lower levels, you get to kind of pick and choose per se, but sometimes you just be like, hey, they got this coming up, so you're on it.
Yeah.
So it is what it is, like I'm more than happy to help out when I can. It's just, knowing your bandwidth and being honest about that is important.
Yeah.
Um,
So after a year, kind of what are your insights into just some of the questions that people need to be asking themselves about if this is a path that they should look into?
yeah, so I would say firstly, I haven't worked this hard since I probably got to the States. I'm originally from Germany and I like was like, working all these little crazy jobs, like working at a pizza shop, working as a mover or whatever, and you're just working nonstop. Like it's like that in the physical sense, but like more on the mental side. So like a perfect example, yesterday, typical Monday, get to work around 8. I left at 8, went home and had a snack, and then I was up till 2. So this is just the nature of the beast. And like, relationships are important, obviously. And unfortunately, with this kind of job, they appreciate your drive and your motivation from a personal level, but like I would say it's even tougher than the military in a sense of like the commitment that you have, because it almost hurts probably more because you come home every day. Like at least like if you're deployed or doing something else and you come back and 2 months away or whatever, like you're very appreciative of that time, but your work schedule comes down a little bit as well. Like here, that doesn't stop. Like the only time we've had like a real break was December in our holiday party and around Christmas time and what have you. And so that's something to be cognizant of. So like if you are, a down to earth family person and you want to spend time with your kids and everything else, there are some, you know, optionality within the job itself, and you can probably plan a little bit around it. But you starting at the bottom, you really don't have a lot of leeway in the same way that other people do at the firm, who get to go home and have dinner every night with their family and what have you. Most of us in the bullpen are grinding it out and ordering Grubhub and everything else. Um,
And I think that's important, especially for a lot of 51 vets members who are transitioning, looking at this. If you're, 30 plus and you might be married, you might have a kid, or, if you come home at 5:30, if you're lucky enough to be able to pick up the kid and then home, I mean, you're home, slam down some food, throw them in bed, and then at 7:30 or 8, and then you're from 8 until 10 or midnight, you're back at it,
yeah.
whether you're an analyst or a VP. And I think it's, kind of having to view it. I'm guessing on what a selection process would be like.
It really is. And it tests you mentally in ways that you haven't been tested in a while. I think most of us that come from spec ops backgrounds, like we definitely have pushed our limit to where we know where it's at, but you're definitely at that threshold on a regular basis. Just in a sense of chilling out and understanding that like, where you're gonna be at mentally, right? Like after the week. Um, there are times like on Friday when I get done at like possibly 7, and I think it's such a treat that I could just like veg out and like do nothing. And it sucks because like, if you're a social person or what have you, like people have already made plans. You cannot plan anything, and it's a very fly by night. And when it comes to like anything in your personal life, just something to be cognizant of. Even if you lived in New York or whatever, it's going to be the same kind of grind in that sense where like, yeah, like there are some fun things to do per se in the city, or if you're in LA or Dallas or what have you, but like you're going to be seeing a lot of it out of the window from your office. So
What does a Saturday or Sunday typically look like?
it's very dependent. But like when you're on a deal and like we're going to market, like there's times when I work 25, 30 hours on the weekend. So you're it's a little bit less stressful per se because people do need to unwind or what have you, but we have our own, like work phone. And the standard is on the weekend you have to answer within an hour. That's pretty chill compared to other banks from what I've heard as
Yeah.
far as the response time or whatever.
Yeah. And if you're going to market, you're sending out all the teasers and NDAs are coming back. You might not be trading emails with the buyer on a Saturday, but you're updating the racetrack report. Or if you're in the diligence phase of a deal, you might be going through all the questions in the data room on a Saturday or Sunday. And that might be one deal that you're on, but the afternoon you might be on a pitch. So you might be putting together the deck for a pitch and going back and forth between working a deal or two and putting together a pitch or two.
Yep. It's definitely like at first, I think the biggest struggle I had was I'm one of those people like you give me a task, I want to focus on it and
Yeah.
just tunnel vision. And that doesn't work here in this industry. Like you have to have your head on a swivel, and anything that pops up, emails to scheduling to whatever, you have to be cognizant of like people are counting on you to be reliable and like get stuff done what they consider a timely manner, which is now.
Yeah. And I think, I did it for 6 years and I left in 2016, and it's kind of hard to see the long-term benefits when we're in the thick of it. and, and it's painful 7 days a week. But I think that what I've gotten out of that is just the uh expectation of what excellence looks like in the professional world. It's at the highest level. And then you see this is what excellence looks like across financial services, legal services, whatever it is. And when you're able to communicate with other people who are operating at that same level, it's like the engine is humming. And it also shows what is possible. And one of the things I learned is just like my network, and I didn't realize this till now, the network that you start to build in there just puts you light years ahead of people on a similar path. And I wonder if like, what are the alternatives? What are the actual, and maybe let me ask a different question. What are the skills that you have developed in the past year that are going to, be part of this foundation for this, this chapter of your life, this chapter of your career?
I think you alluded to it before. I think it's like we understand conceptually like what it takes to be a success in a myriad of other ways, but you are trying to get a seat at the table at the creme de la creme, right? Like in a lot of ways where these guys will outshine you intellectually all the time. Your drive and motivation is going to be a little bit different in a sense of like you're playing catch up in some ways. We have some people that are, I would equate them to borderline geniuses that I work with. Just dumb crap where they like, we're doing a pitch, for example, and a guy is literally just closes his eyes and he said, don't use that version of that slide. Go to pitch from 2020 for this client, page 7, but don't use the top, use the bottom. And I'm like, what the hell? Like this is my competition, right? Like theoretically, unlike who I'm going against eventually down the road, theoretically. Damn. Okay. like, what are you going to do? And I think it just brings a lot of self-awareness on like what you're good at, figuring out where you fit into the puzzle, and just at the beginning, just be super responsive and super reactive to what people need from you from that time frame. They're not expecting you to like move mountains, but the little boulders that they give you, like go ahead and just knock that out of the park, you know? And then they'll build trust and build that rapport with, you know, your folks next to you in the bullpen, but then also the other folks that slowly, you know, trust you to do the next things, you know, like building out a model or what have you, running, you know, trial balances and getting contract logs, you know, mapped out and things like that. So just takes time. And everybody has their own ramp, you know. You might get things a little bit later. I know I did. It wasn't as if I was a complete idiot, but like when you're drinking out of a fire hose initially, and it's like learning a new language or anything else, you know, at the beginning, you're going to be horrendous. And then after a while, then, you know, you slowly start to do better and people actually understand you, and then you can kind of move forward, and that's kind of the way to look at it. But it's every day is it's definitely a little bit at a time.
Well, is there anything from your background and the other members' backgrounds in the pipelines that you went through, the communities that you became a part of, that you feel is actually making a difference on your teams or in the company? And I'm trying to explore this thesis of, can our members move the needle? Or is it just, you know what, you're just an analyst, you're just an associate who's has 5 or 10 years more on them, but it's not really making a difference in the business? Does it make a difference? What is the case for 51 Vets members inside of a investment bank?
Truthfully, it doesn't matter. They don't care. And it's nothing against you as a person. It's just like that's not what they need. They need people that they need people in seats. They need people that just do what they're told in a lot of ways and just get stuff done and be part of a team.
Yeah.
And most of us have success in that. So rest assured, like you're going to go back and you're going to think about times when you're like, holy crap, this is exactly what happened to me like 10, 15 years ago when I just joined the military in certain respects where, you know, people, I always think about the time when like a lot of times, for example, like people will ask like, oh, I need a volunteer in the military. And it's usually some crappy detail that you have to do, like some kind of manual labor, like go picking up cigarette butts or something like that. And most of the guys that were like in the squad or in the platoon, they would kind of raise their hand, but not really. And they want the guys that raise their hand and go do it right away.
Yeah. It's and maybe the experience and the skills that you did develop and the members have developed, it just kind of um has its benefits a couple years from now in leading larger teams. But at the end of the day, when it's out, so you don't need to lead teams. You just need to do the model and do the work, as opposed to the things that leverage the skills and experience. So it's a matter of understanding the time horizon of when those are going to come into play.
Right. No, it definitely makes sense. I think the biggest thing that you can gain from being around uh, a firm like this, for example, is like just the talent level on, like you said, to be successful in like the regular world. Like this is your competition, and just to get a close view of like what successful means. It means like the most attention to detail, you know, like down to the nitty gritty, like every day. Um, Being able to send stuff to people and knowing after a certain point that if Ben sends it or if Jordan sends it, it's going to be good. I barely have to check it and I can just send it to a client. Sometimes you're going to be sending stuff directly to a client, you know. That's
Yep.
the kind of trust that you have to build, and it starts very small because you're going to mess up all the time. And then you go from there.
Well, this has been awesome. Appreciate you taking the time for this. And I think it's a really good insight into, the life of the first year of banking and just being able to enter it kind of eyes wide open and knowing what to expect out of it and being able to think about what it's going to be like after the end of the first year and in the track that it's going down.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it's these case studies are great for folks because I feel that, and for anybody that watches this or listens to this, be sure to reach out if you have other questions. More than happy to dive like a lot more into the weeds on the experience and what have you, and kind of give you some more insight if you need that to kind of make a decision, by all means. But it's imperative that we lean on each other per se to kind of get an understanding of the lifestyle that you're trying to come into, because most people, they feel that the experience is memorable. um as you can say yourself, that's the great thing about you having that experience, like exactly what guys are going through. So it really, I think, helps a lot of folks understand where you're coming from, and trying to get folks to there, because they how much it helped you propel you to be a small business
Yep.
owner and other things down the road. So
I
uh,
mean, when I see someone who's been through investment banking, I'm like, we can give each other a look like, all right, you've been through it. And it'll say, does that look like you can go through anything if you went through a couple years of that?
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Well, this
Yeah,
is awesome, man. I appreciate you taking the time for this, and we'll get this out there. And if people have questions, feel free to reach out to Ben. And if you want to learn more about 51 Vets, feel free to go to our website, 51vets.org. If you're not a member, there's an application process. Love to have you in. And that's it. Signing off. Thanks a lot, man.